Paris climate deal, Trump pulls U.S. out of 2015 accord. President Donald Trump has announced that the U.S. is withdrawing from the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. He said moves to negotiate a new fair deal that would not disadvantage U.S. businesses and workers would begin. Mr. Trump said during last year's presidential election campaign that he would take the step to help his country's oil and coal industries. Opponents say withdrawing from the accord is an abdication of U.S. leadership on a key global challenge. The Paris Agreement commits the U.S. and 187 other countries to keeping rising global temperatures well below 2°C above pre-industrial levels and endeavor to limit them even more, to 1.5°C. Only Syria and Nicaragua did not sign up to the deal. Speaking in the White House Rose Garden, Mr. Trump characterized the Paris Agreement as a deal that aimed to hobble, disadvantage and impoverish the U.S. He claimed the agreement would cost the U.S. $3 trillion in lost GDP and 6.5 million jobs, while rival economies like China and India were treated more favorably. In order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. But begin negotiations to re-enter either the Paris Accord or a really entirely new transaction on terms that are fair to the United States, he said. The speech contained several rhetorical flourishes reminiscent of his campaign speeches. We don't want other leaders and other countries laughing at us anymore, and they won't be, he said. I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. I promised I would exit or renegotiate any deal which fails to serve America's interests. Many trade deals will soon be under renegotiation. The BBC's Regina Vaidyanathan in Washington says the move will be welcomed by many Trump supporters. As for them, this is less about science, and more about sending a signal to so-called global elites. Analysts say the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Agreement will make it more difficult for the world to reach the goals that it set for itself in the Paris Agreement. The U.S. contributes about 15% of global emissions of carbon, but it is also a significant source of finance and technology for developing countries in their efforts to fight rising temperatures. Mr. Trump did not give a timescale for U.S. withdrawal, but White House sources had earlier suggested it could take up to 4 years. Former U.S. President Barack Obama, who agreed to the Paris deal, immediately criticized the move, accusing the Trump administration of rejecting the future. Republican congressional leaders and the U.S. coal industry backed the move, with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell supporting Mr. Trump for dealing yet another significant blow to the Obama administration's assault on domestic energy production and jobs. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer called the decision one of the worst policy moves made in the 21st century because of the huge damage to our economy, our environment and our geopolitical standing. The leaders of France, Germany and Italy issued a joint statement rejecting a renegotiation of the agreement. We deemed the momentum generated in Paris in December 2015 irreversible, and we firmly believe that the Paris Agreement cannot be renegotiated, since it is a vital instrument for our planet, societies and economies, it said. Canada was deeply disappointed by President Trump's decision, Environment Minister Catherine McKenna told reporters. This was echoed by UK Prime Minister Theresa May, who expressed her disappointment and told Mr. Trump in a phone call that the deal protects the prosperity and security of future generations. President Trump's statement is a very clear repudiation of the Paris Agreement and international efforts to fund climate mitigation and adaptation in poorer countries. In many ways it is far worse than many had expected. He sees it as a clear job killer, as an economy strangler and a desperately unfair stitch-up by other countries wanting to take economic advantage of the U.S. He spoke of being open to renegotiating the deal or trying to build a new agreement, but the idea of renegotiation is an unlikely scenario. The scale of his opposition, seeing the deal as a massive redistribution of U.S. wealth to other countries, is a clear indication that he has fully bought into an economic nationalist and climate denier perspective. The question of unfairness cropped up again and again: how the world's worst polluters, China and India, had no meaningful obligations placed on them by the deal. The overall tone and content of his speech clearly plays to his base, but is also a clear disavowal of multilateralism, especially on climate change, and will definitely push other countries more closely together on this issue. Climate change, or global warming, refers to the damaging effect of gases, or emissions, released from industry and agriculture on the atmosphere. The Paris Accord is meant to limit the global rise in temperature attributed to emissions. Countries agreed to keep global temperatures well below the level of 2C, 3.6 F, above pre-industrial times, and endeavor to limit them even more, to 1.5 C. Limit the amount of greenhouse gases emitted by human activity to the same levels that trees, soil and oceans can absorb naturally, beginning at some point between 2050 and 2100. Review each country's contribution to cutting emissions every 5 years so they scale up to the challenge. Enable rich countries to help poorer nations by providing climate finance to adapt to climate change and switch to renewable energy.